stood in the grand hall of the Coalition Embassy, her blue skin shimmering under the artificial lights. Around her, representatives from dozens of species gathered for the ceremony. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few glowed with bioluminescence. Today was the cultural bonding ceremony, a political tradition designed to strengthen relationships between member species of the Galactic Coalition. She had known this day would come. As a diplomat from the species, she understood duty. Her people were telepaths, ancient and respected throughout the galaxy. They valued wisdom and tradition above all else. When the council had selected her for this arrangement, she had accepted without complaint. It was an honor, they said, a chance to bridge worlds. But now, looking at the human standing across from her, felt only disappointment. His name was. He was a security officer from the Terran Embassy, assigned to protect human interests on Prime. He wore a simple uniform, dark and plain. On his hip hung an old blade in a worn sheath. He stood quietly, hands at his sides, his face showing nothing. He was shorter than most warriors from other species. His skin was pale, unmarked by battle scars or ceremonial tattoos. When the ceremony master called his name, he stepped forward without flourish or pride. Had hoped for someone impressive, a warrior perhaps with their massive frames and legendary strength, or a thornback champion covered in natural armor. Even a pilot would have been acceptable with their 6 arms and quick reflexes. But a human. Humans were new to the Coalition. They had only joined 3 years ago after centuries of isolation on there. Most species considered them weak. They had no telepathy, no natural weapons, no enhanced abilities. They were just ordinary. The ceremony proceeded according to tradition. Words were spoken in a dozen languages, and stood before the assembled diplomats and exchanged the formal vows. His voice was quiet when he spoke, barely audible over the crowd. He looked at her only once during the entire ceremony, his dark eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. Then he looked away. When it ended, family approached. Her mother touched her shoulder gently, a gesture of sympathy among the. Through their telepathic connection, felt her mother's disappointment. Her father said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. Her younger brother couldn't hide his expression. He looked at with barely concealed disgust. "A human," her father finally said. "The council assigns you to a human." Kept her voice steady. "It is done. We must honor the arrangement." Her mother sighed. "At least the marriage is political only. You need not share living quarters. Keep your dignity, daughter." They left soon after, returning to the sector of Prime. Watched them go, feeling hollow inside. Then she turned to find standing nearby, waiting. He had not approached during her family's visit, had not tried to introduce himself or make conversation. He simply stood there, patient and silent. "We should discuss the arrangements," said, her voice colder than she intended. "Not at once, your quarters or mine." "Separate quarters would be appropriate," she replied quickly. "This is a political arrangement, nothing more." "Understood." He bowed slightly, a human gesture she had learned about. "I will not intrude on your life, you have my word." And that was all. He turned and walked away, his footsteps quiet on the polished floor. Watched him go, this silent human who was now her husband in name. She felt nothing for him. How could she? He was a stranger from a species barely worthy of notice. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Saw at official function, standing in his assigned position near the Terran ambassador. He wore his uniform and his blade. He spoke only when addressed, and even then his answers were brief. At diplomatic dinners, while warriors from other species boasted of their achievements and challenged each other to tests of strength, sat quietly and ate his food. He never joined the contests, never raised his voice, never drew attention to himself. Other species noticed. At one dinner, a warrior named laughed loudly while pointing at the human section of the table. "Look at the Terrans, so quiet, so small. Is this what Earth sends us? Mice dressed as men." The warriors around him laughed. Even some of the thornbacks chuckled. Felt heat rise in her face, embarrassment mixing with anger, but his expression didn't change. He continued eating as if he hadn't heard the insults, as if they meant nothing to him. "Your husband does not defend himself," a diplomat whispered too. "How strange." Had no answer. She watched through the rest of the dinner trying to understand him. When someone insulted humans, he showed no reaction. When other warriors bragged about their combat skills, he listened but never contributed. When the warriors challenged humans to sparring matches and the other Terrans politely declined. The galaxy saw this as weakness, cowardice even. Whispers spread through the diplomatic circles. Humans were soft, humans were afraid, humans had no honor. Yet notice something odd. Every morning before dawn broke over Prime, she would see in the embassy gardens. He trained alone, moving through forms with his blade still sheathed. His movements were precise, controlled, economical. There was no wasted motion, no flashy displays, just quiet practice day after day in the hours when others slept. She noticed he read constantly. His quarters, visible through the window when she passed, were filled with books and data tablets, military history from dozens of species, philosophy texts, tactical manuals. He studied while others socialized. He learned while others boasted. One evening, after another dinner filled with insults directed at humans, found herself walking the same corridor as. They were alone for the first time since the ceremony. "Why do you not defend yourself?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Paused, turning to face her. In the dim corridor light, his face was hard to read. "Defend myself from what?" "The insults, the mockery. The warrior, he challenges your honor constantly. Why do you not respond?" Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm. "Words are wind. Actions are truth. If I spent my time responding to every insult, I would have no time for anything else. But they think you are weak. They think all humans are weak. Let them think what they wish." He adjusted the blade on his hip, an unconscious gesture. "What others believe about me does not change what I am." Before could respond, he bowed slightly and continued down the corridor. She stood there, watching him walk away, feeling confused. His words made sense in a strange way, but they contradicted everything she knew about honor and reputation. In culture, honor was everything. To allow insults to go unanswered was shameful, yet seemed unburdened by shame. He carried himself with quiet confidence as if the opinions of others were merely background noise. It frustrated her. It puzzled her. And though she wouldn't admit it, it intrigued her. That night, used her diplomatic access to research human history. What she found surprised her. Earth had been isolated not by choice, but by necessity. Humanity had nearly destroyed itself in something called the Unification Wars. 3 centuries of devastating conflict that had killed billions. The humans who joined the coalition were descendants of survivors, people who had clawed their way back from the edge of extinction. She learned that sent most of his salary back to Earth, supporting orphanages and reconstruction projects. She learned that every human in the Terran embassy had similar stories, quiet acts of service and sacrifice that they never spoke about. Turned off her terminal and sat in darkness, thinking about the silent human she had married. Maybe, she thought, there was more to him than she had assumed. Maybe weakness and restraint were not the same thing. But she couldn't know, not yet. Kept his distance, honoring his promise not to intrude on her life. They were strangers bound by politics, nothing more. For now, 3 months passed since the ceremony. Had fallen into a routine on Prime, attending diplomatic functions and representing her people in coalition matters. The political marriage too had become background noise in her life. They maintained separate quarters. They acknowledged each other at official events, nothing more. Yet she found herself watching him more than she intended. It started innocently enough. His quarters overlooked the embassy gardens and her bedroom window faced east. She woke early by habit, a trait of her people who valued the quiet hours before dawn. One morning, she noticed movement in the garden below, was there, training alone in the pre-dawn darkness. She watched him move through his forms. He held his blade still sheathed, practicing strikes and blocks against invisible opponents. His movements were nothing like the flashy displays she had seen from warriors or thornback champions. There was no roaring, no dramatic flourishes, just economical motion, each movement flowing into the next with mechanical precision. He trained for an hour, never resting, never slowing. Then he bowed to the empty air, sheathed his blade, and walked back inside. The next morning woke early again. Was there training. The morning after that the same, he never missed a day. Rain or shine, cold or warm, he was in that garden before sunrise. Alone, silent, dedicated. She began to notice other things. At the embassy library was a constant presence. While other species representatives spent their free time in social clubs or combat arenas, he read. Would see him in the corner surrounded by tablets and old-fashioned books, military strategy from the campaigns, philosophy texts from masters, historical accounts of battles fought centuries ago by species long gone. He absorbed it all, his face focused, his fingers taking notes. One afternoon, curiosity overcame her caution, approached his table in the library. You read much. Looked up, surprise flickering across his face before it smoothed into neutrality. Yes. Why military history? Are you a soldier? I was before this assignment. He gestured to the empty chair across from him, sat feeling oddly nervous. But the wars are over. Why continue to study? Considered the question, his fingers tapping the edge of his tablet. Because war is not just fighting. It is psychology, logistics, culture, history. To understand a people, you must understand how they fight. How they think about conflict reveals how they think about everything else. So you study us, the coalition species. I study everyone. He turned his tablet toward her. The screen showed a tactical analysis of thornback defensive formations. Knowledge is never wasted. Even in peace, understanding others prevents misunderstandings, prevents future conflicts. Felt something shift in her perception of him. This was not the simple security officer she had assumed him to be. The others think humans are simple, weak. I know. There was no bitterness in his voice, just acknowledgement. Does it not bother you? Closed his tablet, meeting her eyes directly. For the first time she saw something in his gaze, not anger, not pride, something deeper, something patient. My father taught me a saying from old Earth. The wise warrior avoids the battle. If I can be underestimated, if others think humans are weak, that is an advantage, not a problem. Before could respond, he stood and bowed. Excuse me, I have duties. He left, taking his books with him, sat alone thinking about his words. An advantage. He saw mockery as a strategic benefit. It was a perspective she had never considered. The diplomatic dinners continued, and they remained as unpleasant as ever. The warrior had made insulting humans his personal entertainment. At one dinner, he stood and announced loudly that he could defeat every human in the embassy with one hand tied behind his back. The room erupted in laughter. The human delegation, including, sat quietly and continued eating. Felt her telepathic senses pick up emotions from around the room, amusement from most species, contempt from the embarrassment from a few, but from nothing. His mind was still like a deep pool of water. No anger, no shame, no reaction at all. It was unnerving. Your human does not even pretend to have courage, a thornback dignitary whispered to her. My condolences on your arrangement. That night couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about stillness, about the way he absorbed insults without reaction. In culture, emotional control was valued, but this was different. Wasn't suppressing emotions. He simply didn't care about the mockery. It was as if he existed on a different level where such things couldn't touch him. She decided to speak with him, found in his quarters, the door partially open. She knocked gently. He appeared a moment later, dressed in simple clothing, his blade as always on his hip. Is something wrong? May I come in? He stepped aside, letting her enter. His quarters were sparse but organized. Books lined one wall. A small altar stood in the corner, holding a candle and a photograph of people she assumed were his family. The room smelled of tea and old paper. "Why do you let them mock you?" the question burst from her. "Why do you let treat you like a coward?" Poured tea for both of them, his movements calm. "Sit, please." She sat on the simple chair. He handed her the tea and sat across from her. For a long moment he was quiet, gathering his thoughts. Then he spoke. "Before I came here, I served in the Terran Defense Forces. I fought in the last of the unification campaigns. I saw what happens when warriors let their pride control them, when they respond to every challenge, every insult. I saw cities burn because someone's honor was questioned. I saw millions die because no one could walk away from a fight." He sipped his tea. "Calls me a coward. Perhaps I am, but I have killed men, I have taken lives in war, I know what that costs. So when he challenges me, when he mocks humanity, I think about the alternative. I think about what would happen if I responded, and I choose silence." Felt her telepathic senses reaching toward him, trying to understand. What she felt shocked her. Beneath his calm surface carried deep sadness. Not shame, not fear, sadness, the weight of memory. "You have seen terrible things." "We all have. Every human alive today is descended from survivors. We nearly destroyed ourselves. We came so close to extinction that we can still smell the ashes. That changes a people. It teaches you what matters and what doesn't." He set down his tea. "'S opinion of me doesn't matter. My pride doesn't matter. What matters is preventing the next war, the next genocide. If I can do that by being silent and letting others think I am weak, then that is a small price." "But you are not weak," said quietly. "I have watched you train, I have seen you study. You are preparing for something." Smiled a sad expression. "I am preparing for peace, hopping for peace, but trained for war, because hope alone has never been enough." They talked for another hour. Told her about Earth, about the unification wars, about the orphanages he supported with his salary. Children who had lost their parents in the final campaigns. He spoke of his duty to them, to build a better future. He spoke of his hope that humanity could contribute to the coalition, could learn from other species, could find their place in the galaxy without repeating the mistakes of their past. Listened and began to understand. The silence she had mistaken for weakness was actually discipline. The humility she thought was cowardice was actually wisdom, was not a lesser being. He was a warrior who had evolved beyond the need to prove himself. When she left his quarters that night, felt something she had not expected. Respect, and perhaps in time the beginning of something more. The weeks continued. Found herself seeking company more often. They would have tea in the evenings, discussing philosophy and culture. He taught her about human history, the struggles and triumphs of his people. She shared telepathic techniques, helping him understand how her people perceived the world. At diplomatic functions, she began to see the gatherings through his eyes. The boasting, the challenges, the constant need to prove dominance. It all seemed childish when viewed from his perspective. While others shouted about their strength, he quietly learned their weaknesses. While they focused on displays of power, he studied their tactics and strategies. Continued his mockery, but it no longer bothered. She understood now. Let the warrior laugh. Let them all underestimate humanity. When the time came, if it ever came, they would learn the truth. Just hoped that day would never arrive, because she was beginning to understand what already knew. A warrior who has truly seen war does not wish for another one, and a species that has survived hell itself knows exactly how dangerous they can be when pushed too far. For now they had peace, and that was worth protecting, even at the cost of pride. The diplomatic mission was supposed to be routine. Ambassador from the delegation was negotiating a trade agreement with the Outer Rim colonies. 16 representatives from different coalition species were assigned to accompany him, including and the journey would take 3 weeks aboard the coalition vessel Harmony's Promise. It should have been safe. Coalition space was well protected, patrolled constantly by military ships. But space is vast, and even the coalition could not watch everywhere. They were 2 days from their destination when the pirates struck. The ship's alarm screamed. Red lights flashed through the corridors. Was in her cabin when the attack began, reviewing trade documents. The ship lurched violently, throwing her against the wall. Emergency protocols activated automatically, sealing the doors and activating defensive measures. It wasn't enough. The Syndicate was infamous throughout the galaxy. Pirates, slavers, and murderers, they operated from hidden bases in the uncharted regions beyond Coalition space. They were ruthless, well-armed, and had no respect for diplomatic immunity. Within an hour, they had breached the Harmony's promise, killed the security team, and taken everyone aboard prisoner. Found herself herded into the cargo bay with the other delegates. She counted heads frantically. 16 representatives plus crew members, all alive for now. Stood near the back, his face expressionless, his hand near his blade. They had not taken their weapons yet, perhaps amused by the idea of prisoners with swords and ceremonial knives. The leader entered the cargo bay like a storm. His name was, according to the whispers among the crew. He was massive, even by standards, covered in scars and wearing armor pieced together from a dozen different sources. Behind him came 30 more warriors, heavily armed and looking eager for violence. "Greetings, Coalition scum," his voice boomed through the bay. "You are now guests of the Syndicate. We have transmitted our demands to your precious Coalition. 10 million credits for your safe return. Until payment arrives, you will remain here. Behave and you live. Resist and you die. Simple." The delegates stood in shocked silence. The warrior who had spent months mocking humans stepped forward. "You dare threaten Coalition representatives. We are protected by interstellar law." Laughed a terrible sound. "Law. In this part of space, I am the law." He drew a massive weapon from his belt. The blast hit in the chest, sending him crashing to the floor. Not dead, but badly wounded. That is your first lesson. The second comes if anyone else decides to play hero. They were transferred to a station hidden in an asteroid field. They had converted an old mining facility into their base. The delegates were locked in a large chamber, guarded constantly. Food and water came irregularly, visited daily to update them on the ransom negotiations and to remind them of their helplessness. 3 days passed. The Coalition was negotiating, but they kept increasing their demands. Tensions rose. Some delegates argued about escape plans. Others sat in despair. Watched carefully. He had barely spoken since the capture. He sat in a corner, eyes closed, appearing to meditate. But telepathic senses told her different. His mind was working, analyzing, planning. He was counting guard rotations, mapping the facility through sound and vibration, memorizing patterns. On the 4th day, recovered enough to speak. Despite his injury, his arrogance remained intact. "We should fight our way out. The Thornback champion Rax and I could take the guards. We are warriors, not sheep." Rax, a massive Thornback covered in natural armor plates, nodded agreement. "I agree. Waiting is cowardice." Several other representatives joined the discussion, forming an escape plan. Remained silent, listening but not contributing. Noticed him paying close attention to every detail, nodding the overconfidence in their planning. That night and Rax made their attempt. They waited until the guard changed, then attacked when the door opened. It should have worked. 2 of the Coalition's finest warriors against regular guards, but they were not regular guards. They had fought for survival their entire lives. They were vicious, experienced, and had no rules to follow. The fight lasted less than a minute, and Rax were beaten down, subdued, and dragged away. Their screams echoed through the chamber as punished them publicly, a warning to the others. When they were thrown back into the room hours later, both were barely conscious, their bodies covered in burns and bruises. Addressed the prisoners with cold fury. "I admired your courage truly, but courage without wisdom is stupidity. Here is your reward for stupidity." He pointed at a diplomat, a gentle scholar named who had spent the entire captivity trying to comfort others. "In 1 hour I will execute this one. Then, every hour after, another one dies until you learn your place. I will start with the weakest among you and work my way up." The door slammed shut. Panic erupted in the chamber. Delegates argued, shouted, begged, sat quietly, accepting his fate with dignity. Used her telepathic abilities to project calm, but it was failing. The fear was too strong. 50 minutes passed. Found herself standing near who had not moved from his corner. "Can you do nothing?" she whispered desperately. Opened his eyes. For the first time since their capture, she saw something in them. Not fear, not anger, something colder, more focused. "I can do something, but there are 30 warriors on this station. Heavily armed, experienced fighters. If I act, many of them will die. Maybe all of them, maybe some of us too. But we'll die if you do nothing." "I know." He stood slowly, his hand moving to his blade. "I was hoping it would not come to this. Hoping the coalition would pay the ransom. Hoping for peace." He looked at her directly. "I need you to do something for me. When I start, use your telepathy to shield the other delegates' minds. What they are about to see will be difficult to witness. They should not have to feel it too." "What are you going to do?" Did not answer. The door opened. Entered with 6 guards coming for. He smiled cruelly. "Time is up. Say goodbye to your friend." They grabbed, pulling him toward the door. The scholar did not resist, did not cry out. He walked with dignity toward his death. And that, realized later, was what broke restraint. Not the violence, not the threats, but watching an innocent man go quietly to his murder. "Wait!" His voice cut through the chamber. Everyone turned to look at him. He stepped forward, moving between the guards, and "Take me instead." Laughed. "What is this? The human wants to volunteer. How noble. But no, I said I start with the weakest. And looking at you, little human, perhaps I should start with you instead." "I am offering you a choice," said calmly. "Release the prisoners. Let them go. Keep me. I will be worth more to you as a hostage. A human married to a diplomat. The coalition will pay extra for me." Or, stepped closer, towering over, "I keep all of you and kill whoever I want whenever I want. You have nothing to bargain with, human." Looked at for a long moment. Then he smiled, an expression without humor. "I have this." He touched his blade. "You took our communication devices, our tools, our hope, but you left us our ceremonial weapons because you thought them harmless. Toys, symbols. That was your mistake." His expression shifted from amusement to annoyance. "You threaten me with that little knife." He gestured to his guards. "Kill him, make it slow." The guards moved forward, weapons raised. Looked at one last time. His voice was gentle when he spoke, a contrast to everything that was about to happen. "Close your eyes, this part is not for you." Then, for the first time in 5 months, drew his blade. The sword whispered from its sheath, the ancient steel reflecting the harsh lights of the chamber. And in that moment, everything changed. The silent, humble human who had endured months of mockery and insult vanished. What stood in his place was something the galaxy had not yet seen, something humanity had hoped they would never need to reveal. A human warrior, fully unleashed, with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The first guard died before anyone realized had moved. The second fell a heartbeat later. Smile disappeared, replaced by shock and dawning fear. The other delegates watched in stunned silence as moved through the remaining guards like a shadow, his blade singing a song of death that humanity had composed over centuries of war. Used her telepathy to shield the others from the emotions, from the terror and pain that filled the room, but she could not shield herself, and what she felt from terrified her more than anything else, because he was not angry, he was not afraid, he was completely, absolutely calm. Like he had done this 1,000 times before, like this was what he had been made for. The galaxy was about to learn a truth that Earth had tried to hide. Humans were not weak, they were not simple, they were survivors of hell itself, and when pushed too far, they became hell's angels. And nothing in the galaxy was more dangerous than that. The chamber descended into chaos, but within that chaos was perfect order. Moved through the guards like water flowing around stones, inevitable and unstoppable. His blade was an extension of his body, each strike placed with surgical precision. No wasted movement, no unnecessary flourish, just economy of motion refined over centuries of human warfare. The first two guards had fallen so quickly that most people had barely registered what happened. The remaining four guards opened fire with their weapons. Plasma bolts scorched the air where had been a moment before. He was already moving, closing the distance while their weapons cycled. His blade flashed once, twice, 3 times. 3 guards collapsed. The last guard dropped his weapon and ran. Let him go, turning to face instead. The leader stood frozen, his confidence shattered. He was a veteran pirate, a killer who had survived dozens of battles. But he had never seen anything move like this human moved. Impossible, breathed. You are human, you are weak. His expression remained calm, almost gentle. We let you believe that. He raised his blade slightly. You have one chance. Open the doors, release the prisoners, surrender. His face twisted with rage. He had not survived this long by backing down from challenges. He drew his own weapon, a massive axe that could cut through starship hull plating. I will tear you apart, human. He charged with all the fury of his species, the axe humming with deadly energy. Simply stepped aside. The axe whistled through empty air, swung again, putting his massive strength behind the blow, moved like smoke, the weapon never quite finding him. To his telepathic senses, his mind was a quiet lake, readings, intentions before they became actions. On the third swing, stopped evading. His blade met the axe at an angle, redirecting the force rather than blocking it. The axe buried itself in the floor. Before could pull it free, struck. Not a killing blow, but precise. The blade cut through the tendons in its weapon hand. The pirate leader roared in pain, stumbling backward. I gave you a chance, said quietly. You should have taken it. Drew a backup weapon with his other hand, firing wildly. Was already moving, closing in. The next few seconds were almost too fast to follow. When it ended, was on his knees, disarmed and defeated. His blade rested against his neck. The station said, How many remain? Spat blood. 24. You cannot defeat them all. They will kill you and everyone here. 24, repeated thoughtfully. He looked at the other delegates who were watching him with expressions of shock and awe. Stay here. Seal the door after I leave. Do not open it until I return. You cannot fight them all alone, shouted, his voice weak from his injuries but filled with disbelief. Paused at the door, glancing back. I am not going to fight them. His expression hardened. I am going to eliminate a threat. There is a difference. He stepped into the corridor and used her telepathy to trigger the door controls, sealing it behind him. The delegates rushed to the observation panel, trying to see what was happening, pressed her telepathic senses outward, tracking through the station. What happened next would become legend in Coalition space, a story told and retold with growing disbelief. Felt it all through her telepathic connection. She witnessed every moment, every decision, every kill. Moved through the station like a ghost. They had numbers and superior firepower, but had something they could not match. He had been trained in the crucible of Earth's bloodiest wars. He had studied strategy from a dozen species. And most importantly, he understood something that did not. Warfare was not about strength or weapons. It was about will, discipline, and the cold calculation of victory. The first group died in their barracks, never knowing what hit them. Used the station against them, cutting power to sections and attacking in the darkness. He was patient, methodical. When they organized a defensive position, he bypassed it entirely, striking where they were weak. Felt this growing panic through her telepathy. They had expected a prisoner revolt, something they could crush with overwhelming force. Instead, they were being hunted by a single human who seemed to anticipate their every move. They tried to coordinate to trap him, but had studied their tactics during his days in captivity. He knew how they thought, how they would react. He was always 2 steps ahead. In the station's command center, a group of 6 made their stand. They had heavy weapons, fortified positions, and numerical advantage. It should have been impossible for one person to take that room. Did it in 90 seconds. He used a combination of distraction, misdirection, and brutal efficiency. When it was over, he had control of the station's systems. The remaining, realizing they had lost, tried to flee to their ships, sealed the docking bays. He gave them one final chance to surrender. Most did. 3 decided to fight to the death, granted their wish. When the station was secure, returned to the holding chamber. He was covered in blood, none of it his own. His blade was still in his hand, the steel stained. His uniform was torn, but his face remained calm, his breathing steady. He looked exactly as he had before, just a quiet human doing what needed to be done. The door opened. The delegates stared at him in silence. Even, who had spent months mocking humanity, could only stare with his mouth hanging open. The scholar whose execution had triggered everything began to cry with relief and shock. "It is over," said simply. "I have sent a distress signal. Coalition forces will arrive within 6 hours. The surviving are secured in the cargo bay. We are safe." You struggled to find words. "You killed them, all of them, alone." "Not all," corrected. 14 surrendered. I killed 16. There is a difference." He cleaned his blade with a cloth from his uniform, then sheathed it. The whisper of steel on sheath seemed loud in the silent chamber. "I took no pleasure in it, but it was necessary." Rax, the Thornback warrior, stepped forward. His natural armor was cracked from his failed escape attempt, but his eyes showed newfound respect. "I have fought for 20 years. I have never seen anything like what you just did. How is such skill possible?" Looked at him for a long moment. Humanity spent 300 years at war with itself. We fought with everything we had. Weapons, tactics, strategies. We destroyed cities, shattered nations, nearly ended our own species. Every human alive today is descended from the survivors of that hell. We learned to fight not because we are naturally strong or fast. We learned because if we did not, we would have gone extinct. He gestured around the chamber. "Every species here has natural advantages, have strength. Thornbacks have armor, have telepathy. Humans have nothing but our minds and our will. So we learned to use them better than anyone else. We studied every form of combat from our history. We practiced until our bodies broke, then practiced more. We turned warfare into a science, an art, a philosophy, not because we loved violence, but because we had no choice." Stepped forward, her telepathic senses overwhelmed by what she had witnessed. "Why did you hide this? Why let everyone believe humans were weak?" His expression softened when he looked at her. "Because we hoped we would never need to show them the truth. Because we wanted to join the coalition as partners, not conquerors. Because we have seen what happens when warrior species are feared instead of respected. We wanted peace. We still do. But peace requires strength to protect it." He walked to the observation window, looking out at the asteroid field. "For 5 months I endured insults. I let the galaxy think humans were simple, weak, unworthy of respect. It was difficult, but I thought it was worth it if we could avoid this." He gestured to the station around them, to the bodies beyond the door. "I did not want to kill today. But when they threatened, when they started executing innocent people, I had no choice. Some things are worth fighting for. Some things are worth killing for. And protecting those who cannot protect themselves is one of them." The chamber fell silent. The delegates processed what they had witnessed, what it meant for their understanding of humanity. The coalition had welcomed Earth as a junior partner, a species to be protected and guided. Now they realized the truth. Humanity did not need protection. They never had. Over the next hours, as they waited for rescue, answered questions. He explained human martial arts, military philosophy, tactical training. He spoke of the unification wars, of the lessons learned in blood and fire. He was patient, humble, treating each question with respect. But notice something. Despite everything, despite revealing humanity's true nature, seemed sad. He had won a victory, saved lives, proved human worth, but he looked like a man who had lost something precious. Later, when the others were resting, she approached him. "Why do you look so sad? You saved us." Nodded slowly. "I saved us, but I also destroyed something we worked hard to build. We wanted to be underestimated, wanted to be dismissed. It gave us freedom to learn, to grow, to integrate without threatening anyone. Now that is gone. The galaxy knows what humans are capable of. They will fear us, and fear breeds conflict. But they also respect you now, respect us." "Yes," he looked at her, "and I hope that respect leads to understanding, not fear. I hope the galaxy sees that we use our skills to protect, not dominate, that we choose peace when we can and violence only when we must." He touched the blade on his hip. "This was my last resort. I hope it never needs to be drawn again." Understood. Had not just risked his life today. He had risked humanity's carefully built reputation, their strategy for integration. He had done it to save them, and she realized with absolute clarity that she had never been married to a weak man. She had been married to the strongest man she had ever known, strong enough to endure mockery and insult for the greater good. When coalition forces finally arrived, they found the delegates safe and a station full of captured or dead pirates. The reports that followed would spread throughout coalition space. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity truly was. And nothing would ever be the same again. The news spread through coalition space like wildfire. A single human security officer had defeated 30 pirates, rescued 16 delegates, and captured an entire pirate station. The report was by multiple witnesses from different species. The Coalition Intelligence Division conducted interviews, reviewed station logs, examined the bodies. All evidence confirmed the impossible. Humans were not what everyone had believed. Watched the transformation happen in real time. She and the other delegates were taken to a coalition medical facility for examination and debriefing. The doctors treated their minor injuries while intelligence officers recorded their statements. Each delegate told the same story, their voices filled with awe and disbelief. The warrior who had spent months insulting humans sat in the corner of the medical bay with his head in his hands, approached him carefully, unsure of his reaction. He looked up, his eyes red with shame. "I called him a coward. For months I mocked him, mocked all humans, and he never responded, never defended himself. Now I understand why." "He did not need to prove himself to you," said quietly. "No," stood, wincing from his injuries. "He was letting me embarrass myself, giving me rope to hang myself with, as humans say. I treated him like an inferior while he was observing me, learning my weaknesses, understanding how I think." He laughed bitterly. "If we had fought, he would have destroyed me in seconds. He knew it. I was too arrogant to see it." The warrior left to find, presumably to apologize, watched him go, then continued her own search. She found in a private room, staring out the window at the stars. He had showered and changed into a clean uniform. His blade hung at his hip as always, but something about him seemed different now. Heavier, more visible. "How are you?" she asked. Turned, offering a small smile. "Physically, fine, not a scratch on me. Emotionally," he gestured for her to sit. "That is more complicated." Sat beside him. Through their months together, they had developed an easy comfort with each other. Now, after what she had witnessed, she felt like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. "You regret what you did?" "No, I would do it again without hesitation." He was quiet for a moment. "But I regret the necessity of it, and I worry about what comes next. The coalition now knows what humans are capable of. That knowledge changes everything." He was right. Over the next days and weeks, watched the transformation of humanity's status in coalition space. The Terran Republic, previously treated as a junior member barely worth notice, suddenly found itself the focus of intense attention. Military analysts studied actions, trying to understand human combat capabilities. Political leaders reassessed their positions on Earth. Species that had dismissed humans now approached with caution and respect. The Coalition Security Council held an emergency session, attended as part of the delegation. She watched as the counselors debated the implications of the incident. Some argued that humans should be restricted, their military capabilities monitored closely. Others insisted that humanity had proven themselves valuable allies. The debate raged for hours. Finally, Ambassador, the representative who had survived the kidnapping, stood to speak. His voice carried through the chamber with telepathic weight. I was there. I saw what the human did, and what I witnessed was not a display of aggression or dominance. I saw a warrior who tried every peaceful option before resorting to violence, who gave his enemies chances to surrender, who took no pleasure in killing, who mourned the necessity even as he performed it with perfect skill. He looked around the council. Humanity has shown us something we forgot. True strength is not the absence of capability. It is the choice to restrain that capability until absolutely necessary. They could have announced their martial prowess when they joined, could have demanded respect through displays of force. Instead, they chose humility. They endured mockery and insult. They let us underestimate them. Why? Because they understood that peace is more valuable than pride. The council chamber was silent. Ambassador continued. I propose we offer humanity a position on the Security Directorate, not because we fear them, but because we need their perspective. They are warriors who have learned the cost of war, teachers who can help us understand what true strength means. The vote was called. The measure passed with overwhelming support. Humanity would have a seat at the highest table of coalition leadership. The species that had joined only 3 years ago, dismissed as weak and simple, would help guide the entire galaxy. When told the news, he seemed more burdened than pleased. This is what I feared. Now they expect us to be warriors first, partners second. Is that not better than being dismissed? It is different, not necessarily better, he sighed, but we will adapt. Humans are good at that if nothing else. The changes continued. Military academies across coalition space requested human instructors, received hundreds of invitations to teach, to train, to share human combat techniques. He accepted some, carefully selecting opportunities that emphasized defense and protection rather than conquest. Was among his first students. The warrior approached formally one morning, bowing in the traditional gesture of a student to a master. I wish to learn from you, not just combat techniques but the philosophy behind them, the discipline, the restraint. Accepted. Over the following months, he trained not just but dozens of warriors from across the coalition. He taught them human martial arts, tactical thinking, strategic planning. But more importantly, he taught them the lessons humanity had learned in blood. That strength without wisdom is tyranny. That violence without necessity is murder. That the greatest warrior is one who prevents wars, not just wins them. Watched her husband become a teacher, a bridge between humanity and the galaxy. She saw the respect in other species' eyes when they looked at him now. But she also saw the weight he carried, the burden of representing his entire species, of showing them that humans could be trusted with power. Their relationship transformed as well. What had begun as a political arrangement had become a genuine partnership. They spent evenings together discussing philosophy and culture, taught advanced telepathic theory, taught human meditation techniques. They learned from each other, balanced each other. One evening, 6 months after the incident, they sat together in their shared quarters. They had moved in together officially, finally making their marriage real rather than just political. The apartment was a blend of their cultures, crystals that hummed with telepathic resonance, human books and calligraphy, furniture from a dozen worlds. Do you regret it? Asked suddenly. Our marriage, it has brought you so much attention, so much responsibility. Considered the question carefully as he considered everything. At first, yes, I regretted being taken from my quiet life, thrust into the diplomatic world, married to someone I did not know, but that regret faded quickly. He took her hand. You saw past the assumptions. You looked deeper, tried to understand. That meant everything to me. I did not understand at first, she admitted. I thought you were weak. I was ashamed to be married to a human. I know. There was no anger in his voice. Most people thought the same. Some still do, despite everything. But I was wrong, and I am grateful for that. Grateful that you showed me what real strength looks like. She leaned against him. I think I would have spent my life believing in simple strength, physical power, natural abilities. You taught me that true strength is much more complex. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars through the window. Prime glowed below them, the coalition capital where species from across the galaxy came together. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still prejudices, still wars. But it was better than the alternative, better than the chaos that would come without cooperation and understanding. The Council wants me to take a permanent position as military advisor, said eventually. They want humanity to help develop coalition security doctrine. Will you accept? I am considering it, but only if they understand the conditions. I will not help them build weapons of conquest, will not train soldiers to dominate others. If I accept, it must be to promote defense, protection, peacekeeping. That sounds like you, smiled. Always trying to find the peaceful path even when teaching warfare. Someone has to. He stood, walking to where his blade hung on the wall. He had not worn it since returning from the station, keeping it displayed instead. A reminder, a warning, a promise. This blade represents everything I am. Sharp enough to kill but kept sheathed. Deadly when drawn but only as a last resort. I hope I never need to draw it again. But you will if necessary. Always. He turned back to her. That is the burden of being a warrior. Living with the knowledge of what you can do, choosing every day not to do it but remaining ready for when you must. It is not easy, but it is necessary. Understood. She had learned so much in the months since their marriage. About humans, about strength, about herself. The galaxy was learning too, slowly realizing that the quiet species from Earth was neither weak nor dangerous, but something more complex. Humanity was a species that had survived hell and emerged with the wisdom to avoid creating another one. As weeks turned to months, the initial shock of humanity's revelation faded into a new normal. Humans were no longer dismissed or mocked, but they were also not feared or isolated. Instead, they found their place in the coalition as teachers, advisors, and partners. They shared their hard-won knowledge, always with the caveat that their skills should be used for protection, not aggression. Became one of the most respected figures in coalition space, not because of what he had done on the station, but because of what he did afterward. He used his fame to promote understanding, to teach restraint, to build bridges between species. He showed the galaxy that humanity's strength lay not in their combat skills, but in their wisdom about when to use those skills and when to put them aside. Years later, historians would look back on this period as a turning point. The moment when the coalition truly understood what it meant to be a community of diverse species. When they learned that strength comes in many forms, that wisdom is more valuable than power, and that the most dangerous beings are often the quietest. Would remember it differently. She would remember the silent human who became her husband, who taught her to see beyond surface assumptions, who showed her that real courage is choosing peace when you are fully capable of war. She would remember the moment when he drew his blade and changed everything, not by what he destroyed, but by what he revealed about humanity and about strength itself. The blade hung on their wall, sheathed and silent. It remained there for decades, a symbol of the warrior who preferred peace, the teacher who had learned through suffering, the human who had shown the galaxy what his species truly was. Not weak, not simple, not inferior. Just survivors who had learned the cost of violence and chosen a better path forward. And in the end, that was the most powerful thing of all.